The sound that will never leave me isn't the siren, it's the song. Happy birthday to you. 40 people swaying, clapping off beat, frosting on fingers, the old record player humming somewhere behind the laughter. And then, flashlights. The balloons were still floating when the door burst open. The air changed. Warm cake and candle smoke cut through by gun oil and authority. Military police, black uniforms, the kind that don't explain. Hands visible. Step away from the table. Someone screamed. Someone else dropped a glass. My grandfather blinked at the sudden light, the birthday candles still flickering in front of him. I remember the reflection of red and blue sirens on the frosting, an American flag cake sliced by chaos. Jake, my husband, was the only one who didn't move. He caught my wrist under the table and said, "Calm, steady, seal." Steady. Don't move. Let them do their job. I didn't breathe. 2 hours earlier, this was just a family party. Our farmhouse in Iowa, porch lights strung up, grill smoking, my father beaming like the emperor of small-town civility. He'd said it himself. 80 years old and Grandpa Joe still sharp as a bayonet. We'll make it a night to remember. He wasn't wrong. Grandpa Joe was sitting in his recliner by the window, a blanket with the Navy emblem tucked around his legs. His voice carried that soft gravel of old sailors who'd outlived their storms. When I kissed his forehead, he whispered, "You didn't have to drive all this way, Em." "I wouldn't miss it," I said. He looked at Jake, nodded. "Still guarding her?" Jake smiled. "Always." My father joined us, glass of bourbon in hand. "You two could learn a lot from this man," he said, gesturing to Grandpa Joe. "Served his country, raised a family, never caused a scene." Jake chuckled politely. "I'll do my best, sir." Dad's smirk sharpened. "Your best is usually taking orders, isn't it?" I felt the temperature drop. Jake didn't flinch. He just took my hand, thumb brushing my knuckles like a shield that didn't need noise. Now, back in the moment, the raid, those same hands were raised. 2 MPs had my father pinned by the arm as he shouted, "This is my house. You can't touch my records." One of them said, "Sir, this is an authorized seizure under Title 18. Step aside." Jake's voice cut low near my ear. "Stay still. Something's wrong. I clocked those SUVs 20 minutes ago." I whispered, "What's happening?" He looked at the black duffel one of the agents carried out of the office, files spilling out. "This isn't a birthday," he said. "It's an operation." The words hit harder than the sirens. The cake, the laughter, the clinking glasses, everything shrank into static. My mother grabbed my arm. "Emily, do something." "What can I do?" I said. "Talk to your husband. Make them stop." "They're not his men," I said quietly. "They're here for someone." The officers moved fast, computers unplugged, hard drives bagged, file cabinets opened. Grandpa Joe's medals, still displayed on the mantel, gleamed under the flashlight beams. It looked like they were searching for ghosts inside our family. My father shouted again, "You can't just walk in here!" The lead agent replied, "We have a warrant, Mr. Carter. Federal Veteran Benefits Division." The words didn't make sense yet. Veteran benefits. Jake's eyes narrowed. I'd seen that look in Afghanistan once. Years ago, in a photo, he never showed anyone else. The look of someone who's seen the pattern before the rest. He whispered, "They're not here for drugs or weapons. They're here for documents." My knees felt weak. "What documents?" "Your father's or your grandfather's. I don't know yet." One officer turned, radio at his shoulder. "Confirmed. It's the same pattern. Carter Household Matches file number, Wart 27A, forgery series." Forgery. The word froze the room. My father stopped shouting. Even the cake candles, still flickering, seemed to hesitate. "Forgery?" my mother whispered. "What? What is that?" Jake stepped closer to the agents. "You're talking about veteran benefits, aren't you?" The officer didn't answer. Protocol silence. Jake looked back at me, eyes heavy with understanding. "Emily, your dad's been using your grandfather's ID." I felt the world tilt. The smell of burnt candles and panic filled the room. "No," I said. "That's impossible." But Jake's face said it wasn't. He moved toward Grandpa Joe, crouched beside his chair. "Sir," he said gently, "did anyone ask you to sign anything lately?" Documents? Authorizations? Grandpa's brow furrowed. Your father did. Said it was for the VA, updating my pension. Why? The MPs found more folders, stacks of them, all marked Carter, Joseph H. I recognized the signature. My father's handwriting, traced over Joe's. When they cuffed him, he looked at me like I'd betrayed him first. You brought this on us, he spat. Marrying that military rat. I didn't say a word. Jake didn't let me. His hand tightened around mine until I remembered how to breathe again. The sirens outside faded as the convoy pulled away. Inside, the music had stopped, but the record player kept spinning in silence. Needles stuck, looping one dull note like a heart refusing to stop. Mom sat on the couch, hands over her face. Grandpa Joe looked at me, his eyes wet, voice small. Tell me it's not true, Em. I knelt beside him, the flag blanket rough beneath my palms. I don't know yet, I said, but I will. Jake turned off the record player. The quiet was brutal. Then he said softly to no one in particular, some men fight for their country. Some try to sell it. He looked at me then. You need to decide which one your father is. Outside, the last MP shut the door. The porch light flickered once, casting shadows over the family photos on the wall. In the largest frame, taken years ago, Dad stood between Grandpa Joe and my brother, all three in uniformed poses. I looked at it, and for the first time saw the fraud hiding in plain sight. I reached up and straightened the frame, though my hand shook as I did it. Somehow, it felt like the smallest rebellion, and the first truth. By morning, the headlines read, Veteran Fraud Investigation in Iowa Family. But the bigger war was still inside our house, between truth and the silence that raised me. The morning after the raid, the house smelled of burnt wax and wet paper. The floor was littered with fallen decorations, torn balloons, streamers like limp ribbons of surrender. The silence was worse than the sirens. Mom moved through it like someone in a dream, stacking untouched plates, scraping icing into the trash. No one spoke about the empty space where Dad's car should have been. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers tracing the grooves in the wood where Grandpa Joe used to carve model ships with me. He'd always said, keep your hand steady. Truth is the only thing that needs no polish. I used to think he meant honesty in woodwork. Now I wasn't so sure. Jake stood by the window, shirt sleeves rolled, watching the driveway. He looked out of place in domestic light, still soldier, still sentry. They'll question him again today, he said. You don't have to go. I do. Em, you don't owe anyone. I owe my grandfather. The word grandfather felt heavier than father ever did. When I was a kid, the house had rules that weren't written down but might as well have been engraved in stone. Dad talked, everyone else listened. My brother got the trophies, I got the lectures. If I spoke up, the room went quiet. In that way that makes you wish you hadn't existed at all. He called it discipline. Mom called it keeping peace. I called it practice for silence. Jake once asked me, back when we were dating, why do you always apologize before telling the truth? I told him, because my father trained me to think honesty needs permission. When Dad retired from the VA office, he started wearing respect like armor. He'd walk into every room as if the air needed his approval first. Every family gathering turned into a roll call of his virtues. The worst was the night I told him I was marrying Jake. He poured himself a drink, didn't even look up. So you're settling for a man who takes orders instead of giving them. Jake, polite as always, extended his hand. Sir, I don't take orders. I follow command. Dad smirked. There's no difference when you don't have your own mind. I remember gripping Jake's hand under the table, both of us pretending the glass didn't just crack under Dad's thumb. That line stayed with me. No mind of your own. I used to think he was wrong about Jake. Now I realized he'd been describing himself. At the hospital, Grandpa Joe sat by the window, sunlight cutting across his folded hands. The raid had shaken him. His body seemed smaller now, his voice thinner. When he saw me, though, his eyes still had that old steel in them. They say your father used my name. I nodded. He nodded back as if confirming whether. I knew he liked shortcuts. Didn't know he'd pave one through my grave. Grandpa will fix it, I said. He smiled sadly. You can't fix pride, Emily. You can only outlive it. He reached into the drawer and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. His old challenge coin. It was worn smooth, edges dulled by decades. Your father gave up this coin when he took his desk job. Said the service had nothing left to teach him. I want you to have it. Me? You married the one man who still believes in oaths. That counts. I held it in my palm. It was warm, heavy, and honest. On the drive home, Jake kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting over mine. He's tougher than he looks, he said. Always was. You know this won't stay private, right? Press will come. Maybe court. I know. People will say you turned against your own blood. I looked out at the Iowa field stretching endless under a bruised sky. Truth is still blood, Jake, just cleaner. He didn't argue. He just nodded, like soldiers do when they know a fight's already chosen them. That evening, Mom called. Her voice came in fragments, half sob, half denial. They said things in court filings. Things about your father. It can't be true. He's not a criminal, Emily. He just made mistakes. Mom, they found veteran files in our attic. He was keeping them safe. For who? I asked. For money? For power? For the next lie? She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. When she spoke again, it was soft, pleading. Don't testify. You'll ruin us. Dad did that already. No, she said. He did it for us. I swallowed hard. Then us doesn't mean what I thought it did. She hung up. Jake looked up from across the room. She asked you not to speak? She asked me not to exist. He came over, put a hand on my shoulder, then we'll exist louder. Later, after midnight, I found myself on the porch. The porch light flickered in the wind. Moths battered themselves against it. Tiny, relentless, drawn to a glow that didn't want them. I understood that kind of loyalty. The challenge coin still sat in my hand. On one side, the eagle emblem. On the other, a single word, truth. I rubbed my thumb over it until it left a faint red mark in my skin. Inside the house, the framed family photo was still crooked from last night. I didn't fix it this time. Let the frame stay tilted. It told the truth better that way. When dawn came, the first headline arrived. VA clerk arrested in federal veteran fraud probe. Under it, a photo. My father's mugshot, face half shadow, eyes defiant. The article quoted an unnamed source. Evidence suggests long-term misuse of veteran identity for classified grant access. I didn't need to guess the source. Jake had friends in the Department of Navy. He'd seen enough. He poured coffee, slid a cup to me, said only, "They're offering immunity if you testify." Immunity for what? For being his daughter, he said quietly. I took a sip. The coffee was bitter, but it was real. I don't need immunity, I said. I need a clean name. By the time the sun rose fully, the porch light finally burned out. I left it that way. Sometimes darkness is what tells you the light was never honest to begin with. The subpoena came 2 days later. But the real trial had already begun. At the dinner table where truth first learned to whisper. The subpoena arrived on a Friday. Plain envelope. Government seal. No drama. Just truth delivered in bureaucratic typeface. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The air in the kitchen felt heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. Jake leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me. He didn't say, "Don't open it." He just said, "Whatever's in there, we face it together." I slid it open. The paper crackled. The words were neat, surgical. You are hereby summoned to appear before the Federal Military Court regarding case 17431, United States versus Robert Carter. The rest blurred. My hands trembled once, then steadied. It wasn't fear anymore. It was finality. Jake exhaled softly. It's starting. I nodded. It started when they sang Happy Birthday. That night, the house was too quiet. Mom hadn't called again. My brother David sent one text. They're making Dad the scapegoat. Jake read it over my shoulder. Typical deflection. He always needed someone to aim at, I said. First me, now the government. He poured a drink for himself, then one for me, setting it gently on the table. You sure you want to testify? They'll drag you through everything. I've been dragged through worse, I said. Dinner conversations with my father were cross-examinations long before this. He smiled faintly. That's the Emily I married. No, I said. That's the one I learned to stop apologizing for. Monday morning, I drove out to the storage unit Grandpa Joe had rented years ago. Jake came with me, though I could tell he was letting me lead now. The air inside smelled of oil, cedar, and the faint metallic tang of old metals. Grandpa's boxes were neatly labeled. One caught my eye. Korea, personal. I opened it and found a folder with his old discharge papers, letters from the Navy, and, tucked behind them, a smaller envelope marked RE VA Grant Filings 2019. Inside, photocopies of forms I recognized, the same ones the MPs had seized from the house. Only these were originals, clean, honest, with Grandpa's true signature. And on the fake ones, my father's traced version. Jake whistled low. He forged his own father's service records. Jesus. He sold a hero's name for a paycheck, I said. Jake reached for my shoulder. This is the proof the prosecutors need. But once you hand it over, there's no coming back. There was no going back the moment he called you a military rat. I tucked the folder under my arm. Let's go make sure the right Carter name survives. At the courthouse pre-interview, the air reeked of coffee and fear. The federal prosecutor, a woman with clipped hair and eyes like radar, gestured toward the folder. Where did you find these? In my grandfather's storage, and I said, You're willing to testify? Yes. Against your father? Against his crimes. She looked at me for a long second, then nodded. Good answer. When we left the office, Jake squeezed my hand. You handled that like an operator. I'm a teacher, I said. We don't panic. We repeat until the truth sticks. Until back home, Mom was waiting on the porch. Her eyes were red, but her posture was still the same. Back straight, voice low, always rehearsed. Emily, she said, don't do this, please. It's already done. You'll destroy what's left of us. I'm trying to save what's left of Grandpa. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Your father didn't mean for it to go this far? He never means it, I said. He just does it. Tears filled her eyes. You think you're better than him now? No, I said. Just less afraid. She shook her head. You sound like your husband. Good, I said. He listens when the world breaks. She slapped me then, not hard, but enough to make the air hum. Jake was out the door before I could react, voice tight but calm. Mrs. Carter, don't do that again. Mom backed away, shaking, whispering, He's tearing this family apart. Jake said, No, ma'am, he already did. That night, Grandpa called from the hospital. He said, voice frail but steady. They told me you're testifying. Yes, Grandpa. A pause, the faint rasp of oxygen on the line. You scared? Yes. Good. That means you're human, but you do it anyway, you hear? I will. Then you've already won. He coughed lightly, then said, You remember that flag I gave your dad when he took the VA job? Of course. I want you to take it back. Hang it somewhere it won't lie. His breathing grew heavier. Every generation fights its own war, he murmured. I know, I said. Yours is truth, he whispered. Carry it well. The line went silent. Jake found me outside again that night, standing under the porch light that refused to die. He didn't say anything, just draped his jacket over my shoulders. After a while, he spoke softly. You think he knows? Grandpa, he always knew. He just waited to see if I'd stand. The wind picked up, tugging the edge of the old flag on the porch. The fabric snapped once, sharp in the quiet. Jake looked at it, then at me. It's weird, he said. How lies always sound louder than truth until they break. Then all you hear, what I said, is the flag. The next morning, we met with the prosecutors again. The evidence was clear, airtight. When I signed my witness statement, the agent across the table said, You understand the implications, Mrs. Carter. Your father will lose everything. I looked him dead in the eye. He already lost what mattered. Jake reached for my hand under the table. A quiet promise of presence, not rescue. Outside, a reporter tried to corner us for a comment. Mrs. Carter, do you think your testimony will divide your family? I stopped walking long enough to answer. Truth doesn't divide families. Lies do. The cameras clicked like insects. Jake guided me toward the car. As we drove away, the courthouse shrank in the rearview mirror, a gray block against a clean sky. Jake said quietly. You realize when you walk into that courtroom, you're walking into war. I looked straight ahead. Then I'm walking where I belong. The morning of the trial, I wore Grandpa's flag pin instead of pearls. Dad entered in cuffs, still smirking. But when the judge called my name, the smirk didn't last. The courtroom smelled of varnish and coffee that had gone bitter hours ago. Every sound was amplified. The rustle of papers, the click of boots, the hush that comes when truth is about to breathe. I sat behind the prosecution table, my palms flat on the grain of the wood. The flag hung above the judge's bench. Same blue, same stars, but it felt heavier than any I'd ever saluted. Jake was seated 2 rows behind me. His posture, always so straight it could have been a compass line, steadied me more than any prayer. When they brought my father in, I didn't recognize him at first. His suit was wrinkled, his face gray. But the arrogance was still there, that subtle half-smile, like gravity owed him something. He didn't look at me, he didn't have to. His silence was the same weapon it had always been. The bailiff called the court to order. And for the first time in my life, the man who taught me to be quiet was the one forced to listen. The prosecution began with the evidence, meticulous, relentless. The forged signatures, the diverted funds, the emails traced to his home network. Each slide of a folder echoed like a door closing. When the prosecutor displayed Grandpa's original forms beside the fakes, the courtroom fell completely still. The lighting caught the pen strokes, one alive, one dead. Jake's voice from weeks ago echoed in my head. He sold a hero's name for a paycheck. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper, but I didn't blink. My father leaned toward his lawyer, whispering something. The lawyer nodded, then stood. Objection, Your Honor. The witness can't authenticate these forms. The prosecutor replied, the next witness can. The next witness was me. The clerk swore me in. My voice didn't shake. It wasn't courage, it was exhaustion, finally wearing honesty like armor. The prosecutor began, gentle but deliberate. Mrs. Carter, could you state your relation to the defendant? He's my father. Were you present during the search of his property? Yes. What did you observe? Military police seizing records belonging to my grandfather, Joseph H. Carter. Did you recognize these records? Yes, I'd seen the originals in my grandfather's storage unit. The prosecutor held up the documents. Can you identify this signature? Yes, it's my father's. He forged my grandfather's name. A ripple moved through the room. That sound people make when they witness a soul being weighed. My father's lawyer rose again. Mrs. Carter, you claim to love your grandfather deeply, correct? I do. And you'd do anything to protect his honor? Yes. Even accuse your own father? I didn't hesitate. Especially him. He blinked. Why? Because my father taught me that lying was unforgivable. I'm just keeping his lesson. The courtroom went so quiet I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jake's expression shift. Proud, but sad. Like a man watching a battle he couldn't fight for me. Across the aisle, my father's smirk faltered for the first time. His hands clenched around the table's edge. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. No further questions. The judge leaned back, studying me. Mrs. Carter, thank you for your testimony. You may step down. I didn't move immediately. Something inside me, of the daughter who used to whisper apologies, wanted one last thing. Permission to say one more thing, Your Honor? The judge hesitated, then nodded. I turned toward my father. You mocked my husband's duty. You mocked the uniform that protected this family. But today, that same uniform stands for the truth you tried to bury. My father opened his mouth to speak, but the judge's gavel struck once, sharp and final. Order. But it was too late. The words had already landed. During the recess, Jake found me in the hallway. He didn't speak right away, just pressed his forehead to mine. "You said it," he whispered. "I meant it." He smiled faintly. "You always did." Reporters hovered near the corridor doors, microphones ready, but no one approached. There was something sacred about the air between us. Too raw to exploit. One of the MPs who'd led the raid passed by. He paused, saluted Jake, then turned and saluted me too. It was brief, quiet, unrehearsed. But in that small motion, something shifted. The family name that had fallen in disgrace began, slowly, to rise again. When the court reconvened, the Major General presiding over the case, a friend of Grandpa Joe's from the old Navy days, took the stand for final remarks. He spoke slowly, his voice carrying the weight of old command. "I served with Joseph Carter," he said. "I watched him risk his life for men who didn't even know his name. He was the kind of man who believed integrity doesn't retire." He turned his gaze toward me. "Mrs. Carter, you honored that belief today." Then he looked at my father. "And, Mr. Carter, you violated it." The gavel fell. Verdict, guilty on all counts. The general stood. Then he did something no one expected. Not even the court officers. He faced me and raised his hand in a crisp salute. The room rose with him. Prosecutors, clerks, even a few spectators. It wasn't applause. It was acknowledgement. The silence that followed was absolute. That was the moment I realized respect doesn't need noise. It only needs witnesses. Outside the courthouse, sunlight hit the marble steps like fire. Jake walked beside me, the challenge coin glinting in his palm. He pressed it back into my hand. "This belongs to you now." "No," I said. "It belonged to Grandpa. I just earned the right to hold it," he smiled. "Then hold it high." I looked back once at the building, the flag rippling above it. For the first time, it didn't feel like a symbol I borrowed. It felt like something I'd reclaimed. My father went to prison quietly. My mother vanished into silence. But the next salute came not from a soldier. It came from the man whose honor had almost been sold. Grandpa Joe. 3 weeks after the verdict, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and wilted carnations. Grandpa Joe's room overlooked the VA courtyard, where flags lined the path like sentinels. The one nearest his window flapped lazily in the heat. He was thinner now, bones showing through skin, but his eyes were sharp as ever. When Jake and I walked in, he was awake. Television muted, metal rack gleaming faintly under the fluorescent light. He pointed at the screen where a news ticker scrolled. "Carter convicted in veteran record fraud." "Your father made front page," he said, voice gravelly. "First Carter in this family to make national news since Korea. I wish it were for a medal." Jake started to speak, but Grandpa held up a hand. "Don't soften it. Lies don't need cushions." I sat beside him, holding the small folder the court had returned to me. The real documents, his real service records. "I wanted you to have these back," I said. He looked at the papers for a long time, eyes glassy. "You gave me more than that, Emily. You gave me back my name." The room went quiet except for the slow beep of the heart monitor. Jake stood by the window, looking out at the courtyard. "The Navy sent word," he said. "They're giving you an honorary commendation, sir. Civilian service recognition." Grandpa chuckled. "At my age, son, recognition just means they've run out of younger heroes." Jake smiled. "Then they found the right one." Grandpa shook his head. "Not me, her." He gestured toward me. "She kept our name clean." He reached under his blanket, pulled out a folded flag, crisp edges, still vibrant. "This belonged to your father. He didn't deserve it. You do." I didn't take it right away. My throat felt tight. "Grandpa, I didn't fight a war." "You did," he said. "You just fought it with words instead of bullets. Don't let anyone tell you that costs less." The following week, the Navy ceremony was held in a small auditorium at the local base. The air smelled faintly of gun oil and pressed uniforms. Rows of sailors stood at attention, white gloves against navy blue. Jake sat beside me in his dress coat, hand resting lightly on mine. When the commanding officer stepped to the podium, his voice echoed against the steel rafters. Today we honor those who defend integrity as fiercely as others defend borders. He gestured toward us. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, please stand. I rose slowly. The officer held out a plaque, commendation for civilian service and integrity. Jake stepped forward to accept it, but before he could, Grandpa Joe's old friend, the Major General from the courtroom, appeared at the aisle. He took the plaque from the officer's hands and turned toward me. With respect, he said, "This one belongs to her." He extended it toward me. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then applause started, soft, hesitant, respectful, and grew until the entire room was standing. It wasn't loud, it was deliberate. A standing ovation not for victory but for truth. I took the plaque, weight heavy but right. "Thank you," I said, "but I didn't do this alone." I turned to Jake. He stood when the rest of us hid. Jake shook his head. "No, I just held the line. You moved it." The crowd stayed standing, silent again now. The kind of silence that felt like prayer. After the ceremony, as the hall emptied, the Major General stopped me at the door. "Your grandfather would have been proud." "He saw it," I said. "I made sure." He nodded. "Good. Some battles are fought so the next generation doesn't have to salute shame." Jake placed a hand on the small of my back, guiding me toward the exit. Outside, sunlight hit the tarmac hard, hot and blinding. We walked across it slowly, the air shimmering. The folded flag Grandpa had given me was tucked under my arm. Jake said quietly, "You know this isn't the end." "I know," I said. "Truth doesn't end. It just stops hiding." He smiled. "You sound like him." "I hope so." That night, I sat by Grandpa's bedside again. The flag lay across his lap. His breathing was shallow but steady. "I saw the footage," he murmured. "You stood straight. Didn't fidget once." I laughed softly. "I learned from the best." He closed his eyes, smiling. "Your father used to say words were weak. You proved him wrong." He opened his eyes again, focusing on the ceiling. "You know what the Navy used to say about truth?" "No. It's the only cargo that never sinks." He chuckled once, a dry rasp that turned into a cough. I reached for his hand. "Rest," I said. He nodded faintly. "You keep that flag flying, you hear?" "I will." The monitor beeped steadily, rhythm slowing like a tide pulling back. When Jake came in later, he found me still holding Grandpa's hand, the flag folded neatly across his chest. The challenge coin rested in my palm. I'd slipped it there so he'd never be without it. The funeral came a week later. The sky was sharp blue, the kind that feels freshly laundered after rain. Rows of uniformed men lined the path. The folded flag lay atop the casket, bright against the dark wood. As the bugle began to play, I heard Grandpa's voice in my head, steady as always. "Every generation fights its own war." When the final note faded, Jake handed me the coin. "Want to do it?" he asked. I nodded. I stepped forward, placed the coin gently on the casket. "For truth," I whispered. "You carried it first." The honor guard saluted. The rifles fired 3 sharp volleys. The echo rolled through the trees like thunder, remembering where it came from. After the ceremony, people approached, offering condolences, gratitude, too many words for a moment that didn't need them. When they were gone, I stayed behind. The air smelled of grass and gunpowder. I unfolded the flag just once, let it breathe in the wind before refolding it tight against my chest. Jake came up beside me, his hand warm on my back. He'd say, "You did good." He'd say, "I did what was right," I said. He nodded. Same thing. That night, I read Grandpa's final letter again. Ink faded, words clear. "Every generation fights its own war. Yours is truth. Carry it well." I folded it carefully, slid it into the frame beside the commendation plaque. The porch light flickered again. I didn't fix it this time. It didn't need to burn steady anymore. Months later, reporters stopped calling. The story faded. But the plaque stayed on the wall, the flag above it. Reminders that sometimes the loudest justice is the quiet that follows. The story died fast in the news. Reporters moved on to fresher scandals, bigger names. Our town forgot within a month. But truth has a way of echoing after people stop listening. Every morning, when I walked past the hallway mirror, I caught the reflection of the folded flag on our living room shelf. Beneath it, the commendation plaque and Grandpa's letter. The words blurred with sunlight, but one line always glowed clear. Yours is truth. Carry it well. I did. Every day since. Life after scandal is quieter, almost suspiciously so. People cross the street to avoid awkward condolences. Others stop by the grocery aisle to say how brave I was, as if honesty were a medal. Jake calls it the silence after the firefight. He's right. It's peaceful, but it hums. That low frequency of something unfinished. One evening, I found Mom on the porch. She looked older, softer. The armor of denial finally cracked. She was holding Grandpa's challenge coin, the one I'd left on the casket. Where did you get that? I asked. The chaplain sent it, she said. Said he thought I'd want to give it to you. I sat beside her. The air smelled of rain and lilac. She rolled the coin between her fingers. You think he forgave your father? I think he pitied him, I said. Forgiveness and pity aren't the same thing. Mom stared at the dark horizon. He always said you were too quiet. Turns out you were just waiting to speak when it mattered. Ah, that's what Grandpa taught me, I said. Silence isn't weakness, it's aim. She nodded, eyes glistening. He would have been proud. He was, I said. For the first time in years, she reached for my hand. Her grip was trembling, but it was hers. Not the grip of someone pretending things could go back. When she left that night, she hugged Jake too. Called him son. That word landed like a final note in a song we hadn't realized was still playing. Weeks later, I returned to the school where I taught history. The students had heard fragments of the story, enough to turn me into some kind of local legend. One boy asked me during class, Mrs. Carter, were you scared to tell the truth? I smiled. Of course. So why'd you do it? Because my grandfather once said that silence is a kind of inheritance too. And I didn't want to pass that down. The room went still. Teenagers, usually restless, suddenly listening. That moment told me more about legacy than any headline. One afternoon, Jake came home from a deployment debrief. He found me in the backyard, reading Grandpa's letter again. You still carry it like scripture, he said. It is, yeah, I said. Only difference is, this one was written by a man who didn't ask for worship. He laughed softly, brushing the dirt from his boots. You know, the guys still talk about that courtroom. Word spread through the ranks. A civilian standing taller than half the brass. Not taller, I said. Just steadier. He leaned down, kissed my forehead. You know, I think he'd say the same thing about you. That night, I couldn't sleep. The window was open, the flag on the porch moved faintly in the breeze. The sound was gentle, not the sharp snap of ceremony. More like breathing. I went outside barefoot. The air was cool, the stars clear enough to count. The porch light had burned out again. I didn't replace it. I liked the darkness now. It made the flag look brighter. Jake joined me a few minutes later, a blanket draped over his shoulders. You still up? Couldn't sleep, I said, thinking about him. He nodded toward the flag. He's not gone. You kept him flying. I smiled. You really think so? I know so. He stepped closer, wrapped the blanket around both of us. The night was quiet enough to hear the crickets in the field and the hum of a distant train. He whispered, You know, in my world, we salute what we respect. I tilted my head toward him. And what do you respect? You, he said. The wind shifted, brushing the flag against the porch beam. It made a low, fluttering sound, a kind of whisper, almost human. Months later, they invited me to speak at a Navy ethics conference. I almost said no. But Jake said, You've already stood in harder rooms. He was right. I stood on that stage under fluorescent lights, looking at rows of uniforms, medals, and young faces that reminded me of my grandfather's photo in his 20s. I didn't use notes. I'm not a soldier, I said. I'm a daughter who thought honor was a word other people earned. Then I learned that sometimes the front line isn't a battlefield, it's a dinner table. A ripple of murmurs. Not pity, recognition. I continued. If you ever have to choose between silence and truth, remember, One protects comfort, the other protects legacy. When I finished, the room didn't applaud immediately, they just stood. The sound of chairs scraping against the floor became the only music I needed. That evening, Jake and I drove home along the same county road we'd taken the night of the raid. The air was calm, the sky red like old iron. We didn't speak for miles, we didn't need to. As we passed the farmhouse, I saw the porch light flicker again, that stubborn bulb that never quite stayed dead. Jake glanced at it. You ever gonna fix that thing? I smiled. No, it's honest. It only shines when it needs to. He laughed softly. That sounds familiar. We parked, walked to the porch, and stood beneath the flag. It moved slow, graceful, quiet. I whispered to the night, I did, Grandpa. I carried it. Jake looked at me, brow furrowing. What did you say? Just something he'd understand. We stood there for a while longer, the night holding still around us. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled. Distant, deep, not threatening, just reminding the world that storms still existed. And for the first time in years, I didn't brace myself against it, I just listened. Respect doesn't arrive with applause, it lands when silence stands. Truth restores what pride destroys. Some inherit wealth, others inherit truth. Subscribe for more stories of integrity, honor, and the storms that test them.